Hello, another Promarker video here of Khaleesi and her dragon from Game of Thrones. I started off by using a reference photo from the internet and drawing the face and changing a couple of things about the colouring, such as the darkness of her face, the colour of the background and the colour of the dragon. So I start off with skin tones, layering from light to dark, and I start off with light fawn on the areas where light is hitting her face, and then start to darken it on the right side of her face with nutmeg, cinnamon, burnt sienna and umber. I use my finger quite a bit to blend this, as well as a colourless blender. This just helps to create a nice blended look of the face, but sometimes it can create a bit of a mottled look, which happens a bit later, as I regrettably added a bit too much umber, creating too much darkness on her face. And so when I tried to take some of that off, as it had gone into her light skin tone, creating a bit of a muddy look, it became a bit mottled and patchy, but I think it worked out in the end once I'd put in a lot more blender on there and blended it out a bit more. So in the end it worked out and looked a bit better. So I add a bit of yellowy tone and green skin tones onto there, just on her collarbone and the light parts of her face, as this is the reflections from the light and the green backdrop that I add in here. I use a uni Posca paint pen to create the light patches on her face where there's really a lot of light hitting her face, creating very white, bright areas, reflection on her face. It can look very messy at first and very thick lines I use, but I do end up blending it out, and you see that soon it actually adds to it, especially at the last couple of minutes of the video where I'm adding the highlights on her nose and her lips. She looks like she's getting a lot of highlighting from the light shining on her. So I work the skin tones, the nutmeg and cinnamon skin tones, into her lips before adding some cranberry and henna to finish them off and create a very light tinged red look to her lips, as well as the dark skin tones, and then they eventually blend into the skin as lips do. I then add black and olive green to create her eyes, and her right eye came out very dark at first, but I lighten it towards the end of the video. Another issue I had was her nose. I couldn't get the shadowing quite right on it, and you'll see me a couple of times try with different colour, different browns and skin tones, just to, to create that shadow, but in the end I managed to get it really towards the end. So here you can see that I'm using white paint mixed with a lot of water, just to create a very light wash on her face, not to colour it. I know it looks white now, but in a minute it will dry and it just lightens all the colouring on her face. I then go over with a very light skin tone, the light fawn again, before it got smudged with some of the darker colours, and this just lightens her skin tone a little bit. And then later on I will add some colourless blender, and I start rubbing the colourless blender to take some of the colour off, because that's what happens with canvas paper when you use alcohol inks on them. You can take the ink off quite easily with colourless blender, and so I rub the colourless blender on where I don't want the ink to be on anymore, and then I use a tissue and I wipe that ink off so it's completely off there. I'm not just moving it to another part of the face. So now I'm creating the background, which is eggnog, a wash of eggnog all the way in the background, all over it. Then I use frosted leaf to create these abstract shapes, almost like bushes that are very faded, and then I overlay those with olive green, and I keep doing this, and then I blend it out with the frosted leaf and eggnog again, just to create a very shaded, blended, blurry background. In a second the alcohol ink will dry and you'll see the actual effect that I've created. I think there's a couple of points where I should have stopped because it looked a lot nicer, but in the okay, this on the right, and then I just do a little bit in the on the left part of the screen. Yeah, so I didn't do much with that. I didn't want to create that to be a focal point on the picture. So again, taking in some of the light source from the green background, I use frosted leaf as the background for the dragon again, putting it all over the light areas where you're going to see that reflection of green, because in the dark areas you're not going to see that. On the chest of the dragon from the picture I was looking at, again I darkened it a lot, but you could still see some of the scales on the chest. So I used my fine tip extension for my black Promarker, and I just created a lot of lines. They look quite messy at the moment, but I blend them out, and then I use black to create some of the really dark shadings. I then use plum along with the black to create a purple look, as I didn't want a green and red dragon this time, I wanted a purple one, and then I added olive green to create a darker green area. But the more I overlaid these two colours, the more they just didn't create a dark enough shading, they were too light. So I added the black in there, so in a second, whilst the alcohol is wet, it looks very, very dark, almost like the dragon is completely black. But at the end photo, when I'm not having a reflection from light off there and it's natural light, you'll see that the dragon actually has colouring to it and it has detail to it. So for the wings, I use a lighter purple. I used amethyst and winterberry to create the wings, as the wings, when light shines through them, is meant to look a bit more transparent than the body. So I wanted a lighter purple, and the green just blends into them, and then I used the plum to go over with the veiny parts of the wings, and where, you know, there's stiffer areas to the wings rather than the flappy membrane almost between them. So I do this and I blend it out until I feel it looks like a transparent wing, like a bat wing almost. So I continue doing this, and I think it looked good at the end, and you only see how good it kind of looks at the end when the light's not shining off the shininess. So for the eye, I used plum again, as I really thought that I should keep with this purple theme. And then the mouth of the dragon, I used poppy and tropical orchid along with my plum to darken those areas, to create a darker area where there's shading underneath the mouth and underneath the tongue. And then I used that tropical orchid and then a skin tone just for that stretch of skin that connects the top part of the lip area of a dragon to the bottom part of the jaw. And then I used my Posca pen to create the highlights again, and on the top of the dragon's head you'll see me put a very heavy highlight on there, and it looks awful at first, it really does, but trust me on this and it will look better, and it will look like scales and like it has. So before I do that, I decide to do the hair of Khaleesi, and I cover it with black and blend the black out to create a very light grey on the top of the head. And then I use my white paint pen, and with my finger I dab a bit of the paint pen on, and then my finger just blends it out almost like it's misted into, not misted, oh, I don't remember the word, but it's almost like it's faded in strands of hair going through. And then I use my fine tip pen again and go over the top parts of the hair to create more strands. Then, once I've done the dragon and I've added teeth into the dragon and more detailing along the whole body, I create highlights all over the dragon's body. I then add the little wisps of hair that are going to be flowing away out of Khaleesi's head at the top left, and just going into a forehead from her hair. Then I add some highlights on her face. This just finishes it off on the chin, where the light's going to be hitting the most sticking outy parts, if that's even words. And then I add more white paint onto the nose to create those highlights and blend them in with my colourless blender. I add the finishing touches, which are the eyelashes, and then some more wispy parts of the hair just right of her forehead. And then I think that's pretty much done. So sorry for the bad quality of shining light, but I will be working on that soon, and sorry for being absent for so long. I have been relaxing for Christmas and studying for some exams, but I should be back with a video almost every week. So thank you for watching, and please stay tuned.